No,
And
that's
thank you.
amazing. I really appreciate that. I think that's so good to highlight and to center it. But yeah, and so as mentioned, I'm just gonna start just asking some questions to build understanding and things like that. So the next question I have is, can you please, I know Gino mentioned there's a laundry list of amazing things you do, but can you both tell us a bit about yourselves? Suzanne, if you want to start.
Sure, thank you. I recognize the land that we are here and with the communities of the Haudenosaunee and the Anishinaabe, and giving a set on these here. And so, and it's with an honor to share, my story as a chef, restaurateur, and a mother, and wearing all these crowns. Our crowns are constantly being shifted and changed and evolving. But I think what it really comes down to is like my love for what I've been doing for the past 15 years of my life, which is feeding people, not just stories on a plate, but also storytelling. And not just storytelling, but also sharing my life and my family. My son was almost born in our restaurant, our first restaurant here in Toronto. And I like to say that he is and will be a restaurant kid, even though at this time I'm no longer running a restaurant. And my my contributions to any organizations that I am a part of, from Not9to5 with so much pride and joy, and Food Share Toronto, and the UN Assembly, Chef Manifesto, all of these organizations mean so much to me because of understanding that I first decided to become an advocate going back to when I was in my 20s, and I attended the Million Women's March, and that changed my life. That gave me the insight and the power to understand what my voice meant as a Black woman and as an artist. And seeing myself now, I kind of am still shocked that I'm still on this mission and on this journey, but just so grateful for that. And so grateful to be here with all of you today.
Thank you so much.
So grateful to be here with you today. Not grateful to follow that though. That you are just, oh, too much. I love it. I love it. I am an industry veteran as well. I'm so touched by what Suzanne just shared. I just think that, yes, beautiful words, and you've just also like taken me on my own journey as well of advocacy that, it's so true. Like I'll never forget the first protest I took my daughters to, and how life-changing those moments are. But the first protest I went as a teenager, and the first march I went with my children. And it's so important. You remind me of why we do what we do. In addition to that, yeah, I am an industry veteran. I grew up working in restaurants all the way up until owning one. And both my daughters also grew up in restaurants. They were constantly, trying to help the chef put the chits up, trying to like learn how to scoop ice and also how to get out of the way. They learned behind really early in their kitchen experience, because I would just use it at home all the time, or ask for hands. And so, yeah, my kids are definitely restaurant kids, and they're also like, they always have understood beyond just restaurants the importance of food and what it is and why it matters and how it's this incredible thing that unites us all. So for me, I'm so passionate about the industry because of my passion and love of anything culinary and just the entire experience of it. But I have also, the whole time I worked in restaurants, I really struggled with a lot of the things that weren't, in restaurants, that I really needed to be in restaurants. Restaurants, they provide so much, and then they also are missing so much. And, that is what led to the beginning of Not9to5, which now is a big part of my life. I also do a lot of consulting work as well. So I'm currently now also principal consultant at a management consultant firm, which is really interesting to be able to do both at the same time and they feed each other and they're interconnected, because they are helping me, like one is helping to leverage the other. And I'm really proud to say that, not 9 to 5, although it's in its infancy, like this is just the beginning. So that's a little bit about me.
That's amazing. Like, I feel inspired already. Like, we could stop it, and then I would feel like I would walk away with so
It's a
much.
wrap.
And I was going to ask what brought you both to the hospitality industry, but I would love to ask the question of, like, it sounds like like this root in activism and creating change. Like, where do you think that comes from as individuals?
I'll speak for myself. Me, where it came from is so many places. I mean, a huge part of it is since I was little, I've always challenged the status quo. I'm always the salmon swimming upstream. I'm always, the black sheep, or, all these like weird analogies that we have in the English language to describe this like drive. And I've been always coined the one that's not afraid of confrontation, of respectful, thoughtful disagreement, of, this idea that, I don't know, when I don't see something that doesn't, when I see something that doesn't sit right with me, I can't stay silent. It's just not how I'm built. I'm just wired to be outspoken, and I'm passionate too. So when I'm speaking, I'm very passionate about what I'm talking about, because I won't speak about something I'm not passionate about. If I don't know, I'll tell you right away. I don't know about that. But I think for me, it's just that for a big part of my childhood, I wasn't like that, and then I eventually grew into that. And I think part of it is I know what it feels like to be silenced. And I never, ever, ever, ever want to find myself in that scenario again. And so, and I also know how painful it is to see others be silenced as well. So I think for me, it's about, standing up for what I believe in, and also just my character of going against the grain.
I want to echo so much of everything, all of the English language descriptions of the bad apple, the black sheep, and if I can just, share from my family, line, I come from an indigenous line in the foothill mountains of Jamaica. My family were Maroons, and they fought for their land, and they went to the mountains in Jamaica. That was my great grandmother. She was known for wearing these like wicked military boots, even to the day she died. And she raised my mother, and my mother raised me. And I never understood really why I was always wanting to do certain things that weren't necessarily the things I should be doing, but I just kept pursuing them. I just kept going for them. I played basketball in middle school and high school. My dad was just like, why don't you do something else? But I just loved it. I joined the film industry in my early 20s before becoming a chef, and I was working in the camera department. I was a camera assistant. I was defying what the status quo said as far as what a woman should be doing. And this is what kind of gave me this strength every time, thinking about my grandmother, thinking about my mother. And I lost my mother at a very young age, at 23, at a very, very important age in my life where I didn't really know how to move forward, but I found a way. And the one thing that I think we do so well in this industry is we just keep our head down sometimes, and we just work. We try to forget, we try to push through it, and that doesn't always work. And I think the advocacy part of me really found a voice after leaving and coming back from the Million Women's March, but also being a part of, many marches, and finding mentors and finding people in my community and outside of my community that I wanted to model, I wanted to replicate, I wanted to understand what it meant to actually bring about change and to actually be about that and to voice it, but to actually like put actionable steps in motion. And I'm just, I'm so grateful to understand that now, because I didn't always understand it. I know I just was like, why can't I just do like what everybody else? Why can't I just fall into place? Just, just do what you need to do. And I just like it would just was always not my thing. And now at the age of 44, I'm like, I'm just gonna keep doing what I've been doing, because clearly it's giving me all the strength that I need. And not every day is good. Not every day is easy. And I don't always feel supported. And that's not it's not light to say, but it is very real. And that's what we came here to really talk about, is to peel back some layers, to open up a bit, to be a little vulnerable. But I think that's what's going to get us to potentially a space of feeling that we're not alone, and change is possible, especially when you have that community right next to you, and you recognize that community and build it.
It's really like amazing to hear both your stories as where we are today, like leading up to that. Really appreciate your vulnerability, and it's like I'm very sorry the loss, but I'm so like it's so great and like beautiful to hear that that everything there is kind of propelling you forward, and it's still there. So thank you for that vulnerability. So I guess that like with these amazing perspectives on the world and this drive for change, it led you both across paths at Not9to5. And could you please tell us more about what 9to5 is, and what its purpose is?
Of course. I mean, you know what? I'm listening to the previous question and also thinking of the name Not9to5. And it's so exactly what we're describing. Because, the name really came from, really wanting to set out that we are not that, And I remember as a server always like, oh, the 9to5ers, and thinking of all the office professionals, the corporate clients that would come in, and never feeling like I could relate to that, But the reason, actually, that's not the reason why we named it that. The reason why we named it Not9to5 was because there's nothing about our industry that runs on the hours of 9 to 5, and there's nothing about mental health that runs on the hours, and substance use challenges that run on the hours of 9 to 5. I mean, this is a 24/7 365 experience, and I loved the name because it attracts we've attracted our community, we've attracted our people, we've attracted the people that it resonates with. And but it did start from a very vulnerable place. I, like I said earlier, I grew up working in restaurants and hospitality industry and events, and that entire time I always felt like I was seeing mental health and substance use challenges everywhere. I was seeing addiction around me. I was seeing, I lost a lot of friends in this industry, and yet there was like no conversation about it. It was like, leave your stuff at the door, and, check your emotions before you, punch in, and all these different terms that was like so drilled into my head when I was young. And it just caused so much harm. And I just got really sick of suffering in silence, and, found myself in like really dangerous places, mental health crisis moments. And eventually I kind of got that point of like that, we were talking about social advocacy, that point where you're just like, I need to speak up. I need to take up space. I need to use my voice. I'm seeing too much suffering around me, and I'm not seeing enough conversation. I'm not seeing enough resources. I'm not seeing enough support. I'm not seeing enough, a lot of these things that actually are now starting to happen. And even the fact that this is the topic, for today's event, you wouldn't have seen this 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago. So that is why we started Not9to5, was from a very personal lived experience. And what it has grown into is so much more than I could have ever imagined. I mean, when I think back to it's a love letter to my 20-year-old self in a way, because when I think back to my 20-year-old self in this industry and feeling so alone and so depressed and so anxious and not even having the vocabulary for what those things were, I just knew what I was experiencing was just so overwhelming. And I felt like I couldn't function, and I was leaning on substances, like, to cope. They were my coping mechanism. And that's who I think of sometimes, when I have hard days with Not9to5, is I think I have to remind myself, like, why I'm doing this, and the importance, and that there are fatal consequences to not having these conversations. And so now our focus is, we're an incorporated nonprofit organization that is here to empower our industry, with resources, with support all around mental health and substance use. And so, I mean, I can turn it over to Suzanne as to, why she agreed to be a board member. I don't, what Not9to5 means something different for every single person, right? Because every single person's connection to mental health is different. So I would love to also let Suzanne speak to why she's joined on as well.
Thank you for that. It's funny because I don't know if I actually ever asked you like exactly why not 9 to 5, because I think it just resonated to me because I was like, oh, I've never had those hours except for when I worked in a corporate setting for like 2.5 years, and then I was like, yeah, no, that's not gonna work. But I love that because it did bring us, it brought me to it, other than the fact that I had a relationship with Hassel. And, that relationship was through another community of incredible chefs and industry professionals that I so respect. And I think when the ask came to come and be a part of the board, it was, like, I don't take that's opportunity lightly, because becoming a board member it's more than just like being like, yeah, I can do that. Sure. It's about showing up in a way that's actively, being a part of the board, the soundboard. It's actively being a part of the future of what the organization is, already being able to project 5-10 years where we want to go and looking that far ahead, and being able to find a space that I know, like, I have some big vision ideas that I'd like to see for the future of the hospitality industry, but I can't do it alone. And why do I don't need to. And I don't need to do that knowing that, this organization exists, and there's an incredible, committee of talented professionals that are also share that role with me. And we can bounce back, we can support, we can stand up, we can become allies for the organization, we can be a face, we can also advise, and we can also be there for just offer a bit of our own personal experience, and also offer up some of the stories that don't always get told, the stories that just you don't want to share because you're just like, no one needs to know that. It's just, let's just get through it. And I think enough of that, because I'm so tired of that. And I was really just really needing and wanting that, because being an owner and a chef, it's two hats, man. It's like those two crowns. I'm telling you guys, it's a lot to carry. It's one thing to be showing up to your establishment and doing what's asked of you, but it's also like knowing that you're responsible for people. You're responsible for the well-being, the mental, the physical well-being of people, and and everybody that you work with, not just your staff, but the purveyors, the farmers, everybody. And I think that part of it too was a huge part of why it felt so important for me to become a part of this, is that, I needed some support. I needed some things, some folks to bounce things off of, in particular when it's centered around mental wellness and mental health, because I was struggling. And people don't always think that as a chef, or a restaurant owner, you're good, you're on top, you got your own business, you're good. And it's like, hold up 1 second. Let's really be honest, and let's be clear that it's not always that way. And it doesn't always look that way either. And we are masters of disguise, and we will fake it till you make it. And we will smile until it fucking hurts. But that hurt goes so deep sometimes, and it just is like, okay. And so it is been a year. I think I stepped into this position, and we've been a part of several, shared Zoom groups and sessions and think tanks. And every session, the last session I was a part of, I had a moment where I had to lean in. And for those that understand where I'm saying with leaning in, it's hard sometimes because you just kind of, you go through the motions so quickly, but it really kind of made me feel and recognize and remember that I too need, a bit of not 9 to 5 in my life. And the work that this organization is doing is not just for those that are not necessarily restaurant owners, but it's for everybody that can relate and understand the challenges that we face in this industry.
Well, that's wonderful. It's great to hear about more about not 9 to 5, and kind of on that, as it relates, to some of the issues that are unique to our industry. What are some of the things that you see that are quite common?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can speak to this just based on our research. So we put out some surveys and we've had responses from hundreds of people in our community over the last couple of years. And the top primary, like when asked, so I'll start with the first one. When asked, do you live and work with mental health and substance use challenges? 90% of our audience says yes. So it's not a small number. And when you take into consideration margin of error or people that may or may not be ready to actually admit the answer to that question to themselves and or others, you're virtually speaking about everybody. So, and it makes sense if you understand, the makeup of our industry and, unfortunately, the oppressive systems that our industry is built on. It does make sense that anyone coming through the system is going to be affected in one way or another. So the way it shows up for everyone is different though. And the main 5 primary concerns, when we look at the numbers, are depression and anxiety are the top 2. Number 3 would be substance use, and that would include drugs and or alcohol. And number 4 is related to a lot of stress and trauma. And that can come up in many different ways. So some people have disordered eating, some people have PTSD, like it's just manifests in different ways. Stress can also lead to burnout, since some people have diagnosable burnout. And so, I just think that what often gets missed is, something like disordered eating, because you don't think of it when you think of our industry. We're in kitchens, we're around food, or we're serving food, or we're producing or creating or manufacturing food. But unfortunately, it's, one of the biggest primary concerns, because it is a coping mechanism in a way. Sometimes when you can't control your environment, eating is something you can control, like what can or cannot, or what you decide does or does not, become something you consume. And so I think it's one that often gets missed when we talk about, specific challenges that are unique to our industry.
I just want to add to that and say, the eating part for me is so very real. I believe a dear friend of ours wrote a book around standing over the garbage and understanding that, like, that's a normal position where you're like eating while you're just like in between shifts. You might just eat one meal a day. I mean, I'm going to ask the question to the audience. Throw your hands up if you've missed staff meal, or you have maybe not had a meal, or you go to work hungry, or you go home starving, and you are like, you don't remember the last meal you've actually had sitting down having a glass of water. Like that's eating disorder.
Oh, it's been a few years since I've been out of the restaurant, and I still find myself standing over a garbage can, sometimes just having my lunch or dinner. I'm like, I can sit down and have, it sticks with you, 100%, it sticks with you.
It really impacts you. You're so right. It does stick with you. Thank you for sharing that, Gino.
And kind of on that, I want to remind everyone in this room, this is, we want to turn this into Q&A. So please feel free to ask anytime. We're going to move into that shortly and then open it up, but please send your questions throughout. We're really looking forward to it, and it's going to contribute to the dialogue to hear some of your questions or even some of your experiences. So please feel free to share whenever or ask. So kind of on that, I know we talked a bit about as it relates to eating and things like that. What other factors do you think contribute to some of the things that you found in those surveys?
Oh, so big ones are unconventional hours, inconsistent pay. So when you think of tipping, for example, there's a lot of, uncertainty of, there's a lot of financial insecurity that comes with that. The other one is high stress, obviously. We all know, anyone that works in this industry, the high levels of stress, whether you're front of house or back of house, or whether you're an owner operator. And the other ones that I want to highlight are, like I kind of alluded to it earlier, but the systems in which our industry is built on. And most of them are quite oppressive. A lot of our industry is built on systems of oppression. And when you put anyone through that kind of system, there's going to be some sort of consequence or outcome. The brigade system also has a huge influence. What that means, if anyone's listening, they're like, what's the brigade system? A lot of how kitchens are structured is influenced by the Brigade de Cuisine, which was established a long time ago and in the late 19th century. And the influences are very hierarchical. And so everything runs, it's a chain of command, everything runs down. And the influence came from military. So military also uses brigade system. And unfortunately, when you have work environments that are influenced by the brigade system, you don't have a lot of psychological safety in the workplace. And so the result of that, again, has massive consequences on people's mental and physical well-being. So those are the high level answers. Again, I could be here all day, but
yes, we can.
And I'm making light of that, but it's true. I mean, we're talking centuries of archaic principles that have not been upgraded. I was making a joke to someone today. I said, I finally figured out kind of what like a good analogy is. It's like we're still trying to like use typewriters, and the rest of the world has moved on to like a 2021 Mac Pro. And I know you're all laughing because you all know what I'm talking about. It's like almost manual. It's like we're still handwriting letters to people and sending them via like donkey or something, and yet the rest of the world is like, yeah, no, we left that a long time ago.
Yeah.
And yeah, someone just mentioned, table services based on unpaid enslaved servants.
Let's talk about it.
Let's talk about how tipping is a legacy of slavery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Was my number one first plan to abolish in our last project was to get rid of the tipping system. And I really, 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 if I can ask, to challenge more restaurants, more restaurant groups, more individuals that have these power positions that can choose to make this major change, to take a step forward in ending a very generational archaic system that is off the backs of the most marginalized, enslaved fucking people, that it's time to recognize that these ways need to go. How can we reimagine something if we're still going off of what we're grandfathered in with? That didn't see us, that muted us, that didn't see the value in us, didn't see our skin, didn't see our sexuality, didn't see our flow, didn't see anything. And still, we are not paying people living wages. We touched, Hassel, you spoke to that, and it's so true. The inconsistency of pay, the unreliability of like, am I going to get my tips this week? Because they missed last week. But understanding that if we can understand the principles of what living wages are, You know, as a restaurant group, we have the power. As a restaurateur, as a manager, you can't just allow the government and the federal government to kind of decide, because you can actually make the change internally. You can make these changes on your own. You don't need to follow what everybody else is doing, the status quo, because that doesn't always include, it doesn't include, not always, it doesn't include everybody that's in between, that gets left out, that's not inclusive. And that's so many of us. That's the faces that are here with us right now. That's our faces. And it's just so exhausting to still think that, to your point, we are on a damn typewriter. You got to put ink in the damn cartridge so that the markers and the letters will come through. It's just like, really? Are we still doing this?
We need a software upgrade.
We need an upgrade. God damn it.
And here's the thing, like, I want to add something to that. I don't think it's about making anyone feel bad. I think because oftentimes people are like, oh, I feel so attacked. Like, this is the way we've always done it. And so I just want to highlight that we're not like here to say like reimagine and change everything tomorrow. Like, obviously change takes time. But I think what we are here to say, exactly what Suzanne said, is like, you need to really be questioning and looking at what you're doing and where it comes from and the impact it has on the people that actually, you know, feel the consequences of those decisions. So I think it's so important to understand that, like, this, we are here to push back and reimagine and redefine. But we're not saying tomorrow, next week, but, you know, the change takes time, and upgrading is going to take time, because a typewriter is hard to go from a typewriter to a slick new laptop. And I recognize that, you know, and I know what it's like to be a small owner operator, you know, and so does Suzanne, like, you know, you've been there, but it is possible.
It is
possible. It is possible.
If you really, really can see it. And, you know, like, COVID has given me a lot of time to think about these things, you know, whether I wanted to do it or not. It put me in that place where I had to sit still, and I had to, like, allow myself to just succumb to a lot of things that I just didn't have time to process. And, you know, it's like, there's so much wrong and sadness that's come out of the pandemic. But what the gift that I feel like I'm able to share with you all today is that it gave me a bit of my life back, to understand that I know there are things that are broken and that need to be dismantled and need to be remolded within this industry. And it's not just going to be overnight. To your point, Hassel, it's not just going to be here today, gone tomorrow. It's going to take us some time. It's going to be a lot of work. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel good. It has been hurting for a while. This is the other thing. It's like, we've all been hurting for a minute, you know, like, but we've just been going on, like, it's just been like this go mode, and this forced us to stop.
Yeah, absolutely.
Consciously or unconsciously, we had to fucking stop. And, you know, I'm really consciously aware of, like, that if I can share a bit of what I've experienced and what I've gone through, I think that might help someone else to be able to do the same. And to know that, you know, it's these days ahead, we don't know where we're going. We don't know what it's going to look like, but you know what? It's I don't know. I'm a little lost right there for what to say after that, but
Well,
I see a really great question in here.
Yeah, I do. So I'm not saying people's names just for anonymity. If you do want me to include your name, maybe you can say it in the question. But so hot topic in our group right now, the intersection between inclusion, diversity, and equity. Oh, I can share it. Hannah Price, thank you so much for sharing with us and being here today. So you both just touched on this just now. And where do you see the natural starting point for making these changes?
So for me, like I love intersectionality as a term and just as an approach to anything and everything. I think it's so important. For so long, I don't think that term was really used in our industry very often. You know, I don't think I ever really heard my manager talk about intersectionality in a restaurant. So I love that this is being brought up. I love this question. I think everyone could find a different starting point for making these changes. I'll just speak from what I've seen work and what I've heard has been helpful. I think the first thing is just to like really verbally and written acknowledge the harm that has been caused, you know, by all of the oppression in our industry. I think it's really important to acknowledge it. Just like we're acknowledging, you know, the neglect of workplace mental health for so many years, I think it's really important to acknowledge, you know, the oppression that so many of us, especially marginalized, vulnerable, you know, parts of our population, especially people of color, especially Black people, especially Indigenous people, especially, you know, there's so many sects of our population that have been mistreated, abused, left out of the conversation, not promoted to leadership positions, you know, just so like I think it's so important to verbally and written acknowledge that, you know, acknowledge it with your team, acknowledge it as a company, acknowledge it, you know, because it's really hard to manage something unless you name it. So you have to name it to manage it. I really believe that. It also brings everyone onto the same page, you know. And I would say like the other natural place to start, I would say, is also in trying to, in the best way possible, because listen, I understand. I remember what it was like running a restaurant. It's like sometimes you're drowning in operations and you're just literally trying to get through service and keep the doors open and the lights on. And I fully understand that. But in the same way that you make time for product knowledge, right? If you have new wines coming out, if you have a new menu item, you make the time to train your staff on these things. So in the same way, you have to make the time for these conversations. You have to find a way to invest and put, and when I say invest, it doesn't have to be dollars. It can be investing time, right? It can be investing effort to put in to bring everyone onto the same page. So touching on anti-oppressive communication, touching on, you know, different ways that you can like language to use and not use. You know, there's just so many different ways that you can take this. And the last point I'll make is just for me, always my favorite place to start change is by including everyone and making sure that all voices are heard. Because what's happened for too long, again, I was talking about the brigade system, the top dictates down the chain of command, like the brigade system style. We need to move away from that. There needs to be a full circle situation of everyone having a voice. And listen, if you're the owner operator, I'm not saying you have to do everything that your staff's telling you to do, but you do have to listen.
Yeah.
You do have to listen to every single idea and every single suggestion, and then you can make an informed decision on how to move forward.
What she said.
And I hope that answered the question. Thank you. And again, I do invite everybody to ask more questions to keep this engagement flowing. Taylor, what do we got next?
We actually have another question here that was just submitted, and yeah, within respect to you know, privacy of the individual, unless you say it's okay, we're not going to say your name. But then the question we have for everyone in the room from Puneet, our good friend, is with regards to getting rid of the tipping system in restaurants. I do agree that is dated and rooted in discrimination. However, how would you recommend restaurateurs adopt the concept than even the likes of Danny Meyer, David Chang, and Tom Kalach? Can someone help me with the last name?
Colicchio.
I knew everyone in this room would be able to help me. Thank you. But failed at it. Is there maybe a bigger issue that the government should get involved in to increase minimum wage that allows a proper standard of living?
So I just want to start, and sorry, Suzanne, unless you have something to start. Okay.
No, you go, you go.
I just heard Danny Meyer speak last week, and he actually touched on specifically why he went back to the tipping system. And I think this is sorry?
RC show?
Yeah.
I missed it.
You know what? I recorded a lot of it, so I'll
Oh,
email it to you.
great.
It's actually
But
available. All of it's recorded. You can
Oh,
actually get
wonderful.
access to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. All right, keep going.
Suzanne's right. Suzanne's right. Absolutely, you can watch it. I wanted to point this out because I was always curious as to why did Danny Meyer go back? I don't understand. He had this, he'd gotten rid of tipping and now he brought it back. So he said last week that the reason why he brought it back was because when they went into lockdown, and then when they reopened is when they decided, okay, no, we're going to bring tipping back. And he claims that it was because people were so excited to be back in restaurants and they were feeling so generous that they wanted to tip. And so before they had actually told people like, no, we're not accepting tips anymore. Gratuities are not a thing here anymore. And so he was like, we had to bring it back because people were just, so I just want to highlight that that is not what would happen in most restaurants. I see Suzanne's face. This is the best face I've ever seen you make. I just want to really highlight that like not everyone's being marked, and not everyone has sugar shacks, and not everyone has these clientele that are like, please let me give you money, let me give you money. And listen, this is no disrespect to Danny Meyer. I appreciated everything he shared that morning, but I had a hard time hearing that that's why he went back to the gratuities. So to the question here, so I would actually argue that Danny Meyer didn't fail at it. I would argue that Danny Meyer made a conscious, informed decision to bring it back. I can't speak for David Chang and Tom Colicchio, but I do think that Puneet, you make a really good point here in terms of, is it a bigger shift that the government should get involved in? Yeah, probably. Yeah, yes, it should be government mandated, and livable wage should be something that is given to people by province. So, right, like Ontario's livable wage is different than BC's is different than, and so their livable wage needs to be calculated based on where you live geographically. Yep. And unfortunately, our government often forgets us. We are like these invisible workers for some reason, frontline food service workers. It's like we don't exist. We are on the front line serving food, yet vaccines are not a priority for hospitality workers. I don't understand that, and yet we're penalized and kept closed, even though malls are open. So it's like this really weird relationship between our industry and the government. And I think a big part of it is that we're not really unionized. Probably we don't have lobbyists that work on our behalf. We're not like the airlines that have high profile lobbyists that get paid six figures, to go advocate on our behalf. So I think it's a complex issue, and that's why I wanted to bring up earlier when we were talking about tipping. I was like, I just want to highlight, I'm not suggesting a change from week to week, because I really don't think that's a realistic thing. But I do think that it's like baby steps in that direction are the way to go.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I wanted to add to that is, the fact that in the U.S. right now, they're actually lobbying for that. They're working very hard to do that. The U.S. is actually, they're really, and again, it's going to be a challenge because state to state, it's very different. Governors, senators, states that are in the red states and the blue states, everyone has a very particular idea of how they see manual labor, how do they see folks that are undocumented, folks that are not, part of the status of paying taxes, that are seen in that their work is actually worthy of value. And a lot of that we look at, a lot of the farm workers, we see them here that are brought in through government programs. And we have been pushing very hard through a few of the organizations here to make sure that these laws are changing. The government here in this particular country, I think we are challenged by a lot. I think it does start with the top up. I'm not here to have a political flow. I think there's no space for that here. But I do think that I agree with what Hassel is saying. I think we do need to have part of the engagement. We don't have a union. We don't have lobbyists. You know, I respect Restaurants Canada, but they don't necessarily speak for the whole industry and on those that fall underneath the umbrella of the industry. But I do think that something it has to build. I mean, there's a lot of mini organizations that are doing their part specifically, whether it's provincially, whether it's for those that work in front of the house or back of the house. I think we do have to look towards what that looks like and what that actually means. And do we need a face that states and stands for restaurants? I don't know, maybe. But I think that everyone is running their business. There's so many different types and styles of restaurants and businesses and food businesses. You know, because if we're advocating for restaurants, then we need to also advocate for the farm workers. We need to then also advocate for the delivery drivers. We also need to, you know, so there's a lot of minimum wages that we need to encapsulate and think about when we're talking about what does living wage mean. And we need to have a base that is realistic. And I think every province and every city is a little different. But I'm very, very hopeful. But I don't know what that looks like, and I don't have actionable steps right now.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much. We have another question from the audience here. We have, how do we shift the expectation that food should be cheap and the misguided value proposition of large proportions for low money? And then there was added, surely these factors add stress to restaurant operators, which trickles down to workers. I think this is a great question too. All the questions are great.
So can I start with this one? I just want to say that this question is such a wonderful question, Karen. Thank you for, I'm sorry that I just said your name, but thank you for this question. Because I think there has to be some responsibility thrown back to the customer, the consumers. This feeling that the customers are always right needs to go away.
With the typewriter. Throw it out with the typewriter.
It needs to go. And this idea that cheap food and that food is cheap, we know this shit is not real. And it's a reality for anyone that works in this, that works in anything handling of food. Anyone that handles food, you understand that it's not. And as a consumer, you can go to your local grocery store and you can see that one week lettuce costs this week, the next week it's something else. But yet when you come to the restaurant and someone's saying, oh, actually the salad this week, you know, our prices have shifted, we are increasing. And then you're met with a bit of a pushback and a questioning of why. Why? I come here all the time. I've paid this, I want to pay that. And I think that's where, you know, this educational part of educating the consumers needs to come into play. Informing through whether it's signage, whether it's on the menu, whether it's from the dialogue, that the exchange that happens between the first of contact to then the contact with then the customer's understanding. And really, now this is not a foolproof, but this is something that I think are actionable steps that we can look towards that I think will help to understand, is that educating the customers is number one, because it still is a major issue. And I think that people can go and they can complain and they can say, I spent this much money here, but yet they can't fathom to understand that that escalation, that price increase is directly and how much it affects us. 30% is what you're hoping for to get on an item. That has nothing, that's not even touching anything else that your overhead costs are. And it's almost, you know, insulting sometimes when someone says, well, that's ridiculous. I should have to, you know, like I can go down the street and I can make a salad. Well, you know what? Go make that salad. And I'm not saying to like dismiss people, but I think a bit of education, a bit of clarity, a bit of just like share the wealth of truth that much folks just choose not to want to swallow and to hear. But people need to understand that food costs are only going to continue to go up. We cannot continue to cheapen, because it's not about just cheapening the food, it's cheapening the labor, it's cheapening people. It's cheapening people. It's not just the fucking food, it's the people that fucking harvest, farm, drive, deliver, pick up that food. It goes so much deeper than that. Well, it's so much deeper than that. And I think it's just like that transparency has been overlooked and missed and lost in translation. And it's just like, we really, if we're opening our doors and we're opening our spaces up and people are really telling our truths, then this is a truth that needs to be exposed. It needs to be shared. And we need to be honest and we need to be direct. And we need to know that the truth will always honor the work that needs to be done.
So I have I think that was fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I had a question, if I may, and kind of talking. You did mention psychological safety, and for those in the audience that might not be aware what that means, could you elaborate on that? And then that would lead into maybe another question I have too, is what a person can do within their space to start working towards that in a meaningful way.
So the definition that I love, yes, also applause for saw in the comments. Yes. I frozen or are you here? Okay.
Oh, you're back.
Okay. I'm frozen. Am I back? Can you hear me?
You're back.
We can hear you.
We can hear you. You just get a little choppy.
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
The wonderful world of Zoom. I mean, we can.
I know. I'm so sorry. If it happened.
If you want to click out and come back out again,
Okay.
come back on again. Maybe Suzanne, you can start with the question.
Okay, that.
Taylor, go ahead. I'm so sorry. I think I was in the expectation that she was going to lead it, but she's going to come back. And so I would love to take that question on.
Cool. And yeah, so I guess really quick question here is, you did mention psychological safety. And if, you can provide us a bit of understanding what that is and some of the things maybe you've done. I've read your articles where you talked about vulnerability and psychological safety. So how have you worked toward that in a really meaningful way?
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. I'm going to when Hassel comes back, I'm going to allow her to kind of give a more definitive definition of what that really is because of the work and research she's really put in. But I think for me, it's really important as a chef to always just kind of rely so heavily on my own personal storytelling around like what's psychological, what that actually means to me and how it has affected my life. And I think the first share that I would love to open up is just about, when I opened my first restaurant, Saturday Dinette in the Leslieville, Riverdale area, we, myself and my husband were the two owners. And, we made sure that envisioning what that would look like was being able to build a team that in my eyes, well, one, they could look like myself, and two, that we could provide support and we can also align ourselves with organizations to help give opportunities to the next generation of cooks and chefs, specifically to women. And that led us on a path of developing and building a program called the Dinettes. And the Dinettes was specifically focused on hiring and training the next generation of cooks, business owners, and chefs, and understanding that we are whole people. And as a whole person, you have to understand that people come in every situation, every scenario from different walks of life with different, experiences, memories, and expectations, and having to try to meet that and understand that and find the compassion and empathy was something that I was familiar with seeing, but I also had to learn to get some practice within. because we were working with individuals from some of our, organizations in Toronto, Covenant House, Yonge Street Mission, the Massey Center, and all of these young people were all coming from different stories, and not ever really, for some of them, not being seen, being muted, being diluted, and understanding that psychologically that is something that really weighed heavily on just not just the role of being an owner, but also owning and recognizing that not every day is going to be the same. And working with social workers with some of my team members was something also very real. And that was something that I didn't have the practice, or I didn't have the experience on, but I had the support from these organizations that helped me to understand like what that meant. And that was a commitment that I took on. That was something that I understood that wasn't the norm. You go off of resumes, you go off of who you've worked for, you go off of what you've done in life. But for me, it was about who you were as a person, and who did you want to be, who did you want to see, and understand that the complexity of that, coupled with the complexity of opening a new business, the complexity of all of that being in a new city, and understanding what all of that could feel and be. And it was a lot, but it was something that I pridefully took on, and something that we committed to doing. And it was part of my initial step into understanding that whole people make a difference, and seeing people as not just, and I've heard this phrase several times, warm bodies, is something that frightens me. It scares me. It's kind of, it's really, really dangerous words to use when it comes to like not understanding how somebody really is valued and matters. And dangerous words, I think, are words that we see a lot in this industry. I think we play a lot, we juggle with it. We allow stimulants, and we allowed comments and suggestions and innuendos and these things to that actually directly affect it, and they push us into very dark places. And they're not always the places that we have the support and understanding of how to get out, and what to do, how to recognize it, how to distinguish it from a safe space to no, this isn't right. And I think the complexity of all of that was something that I knowingly, with my partner and husband, we took on, and it's something that is the basis of the work that I hope to continue to do in the next project that I hope to open up in some time soon. But that is, I think that for me it is my personal connection to understanding that the question, and really understanding that we all have a role to play in this. And it's not something that you have the background information, or you have an understanding of, unless you actually are living it, and you can identify it, and you have access to this information. And so I really commend what Not9to5 has been doing, and the resources and the support to being able to identify and call these things and to describe it. Giving the language and the vocabulary is so necessary, because so many times it gets misled and gets disguised, and you think it's one thing and it's actually something else. And yeah, you're back. Hi.
I'm back. I'm sorry. I had to use my phone. I don't know what's happening with my laptop, but thank you for that, Suzanne. I want to add one small thing. So I know there's lots of like more concrete, scientific definitions for psychological safety, but I really wanted to give a more, everyday language definition, which is just that you have, in a psychologically safe environment, you have an environment where people feel like they can take risks, make mistakes, and be vulnerable with one another without any negative consequence to how they're perceived or to their job. And so when you kind of break it down like that, it sounds really common sense and easy, but unfortunately it actually isn't quite relevant or prevalent enough in our industry. Oftentimes, I would encourage people to
really explore how mistakes are handled. Because mistakes and taking risks are two huge parts of psychological safety. Being vulnerable is a big one. And in terms of like how to foster it in a workplace, you have to role model it. If you're an owner operator, if you're a manager, you have to role model it. You have to share your own personal perspectives. You have to be vulnerable yourself. And another huge element of creating a psychologically safe environment is for people to feel respected. And for respect, you know, a big part of sometimes what we don't do in this industry is active listening. And active listening, for anyone who's like, well, what's the difference? I hear you. It's like, you may be hearing my words, but you're not actively listening to what I'm saying. And the difference is that with active listening, you're listening to understand. You're not listening to respond. Most times, even right now when I'm talking, you might be listening to me, but you're trying to think of something, not you're trying to, your brain automatically starts thinking of to-do lists or what you want to say to me back versus actually listening to what I'm saying to understand. And that means listening with your mind and your body. So that means that you're not on your phone. That means that you're not looking over there when I'm talking to you. That means that you're facing me, you know, you're square to me, you're actually looking and facing in my direction. I've heard of so many stories, and I've seen this in kitchens so often, where people are talking to each other and you're literally have your back to the person. So that's, and listen, I know in a busy service, sometimes you can't do that, but if it's important, that's not part of active listening. That's not practicing active listening. So those are just some like high level ways that you can understand what psychological safety is and how to practice it. And I also wanted to highlight that some of these are tools. I'm actually reading them as I'm talking to you. So this one's like fostering psychological safety. This one is active listening. These are all tools that we created, Not9to5 created, that you can download for free, you know, as free resources. And there's about 14 or 15 of them up there right now. We're currently collecting we're building a larger collection of them, but the idea is that you can download these and email them, print them, share them, use them. I reference them all of the time because it's so important to recognize that we can talk about these things all day long, but if you're not practicing these skills, then we're not actually moving towards change.
So I think that's great, Taylor. I'm going to hop in here really quick. I do want a real quick summary. We got to go quick because we've talked so much. We haven't really talked about all the wonderful, amazing things that Not9to5 does and is currently doing, and we want to share all of that. But there is something here I think that speaks well to me. We always come on here, and Shift Change is a place for us to try to learn from individuals like yourself and share this knowledge. And we tend to, you know, to shit on all the terrible things about the industry, but there is so much that we're doing well. And the question is, what are we doing well that other sectors are not? You know, the creativity, the connection, the belonging that other sectors really struggle to achieve, and maybe just some wise words from where we sit, so that anybody that's watching them isn't in the hospitality industry, isn't saying, well, what are you doing? Why do you do this? And
I love that question. And you know what, if anyone's listening is like, why would they stay in that industry? You're right. We have not been highlighting all of the incredible, wonderful parts of our industry. And there are so many, you know, it's not just typing on a typewriter. It's also, you know, doing a lot of other incredible things. So I would say a lot of the reasons why I'm still passionately devoted to this industry is outside of the obvious. So the big obvious one, obviously, is my obsession with anything culinary. I'm obsessed with culinary experiences, and not just food, not just cooking, not just eating, but the whole entire process. But my really favorite part are the people. I really, truly believe that our industry is actually about people. We just happen to serve food. You know, we just so happen to make incredible drinks. We just so happen to create wonderful culinary experiences. And to me, it really is about the people. And for so long, we've been, you know, focusing on the sustainability and ethical treatment of ingredients and products, and not the ethical and sustainable treatment of people. But the industry is made up of incredible people, and our people skills are absolutely, you know, like there's nothing like it. One of the most valuable skills I got from this industry was my ability to speak to anybody. And my ability to connect with anybody. Like the connection, I can instantly create connection with any human, and it doesn't matter who you are, what language you speak, where you're from, you know, any of that. And that's something I got from the hospitality industry as a server. I had to serve everybody. And so I had to quickly create connection with, you know, another human being in like 5 seconds, you know, and get their order, and then move on to the next table and do it again, and then do it again, and then do it again. And so I would say outside of that, you know, we also have an incredibly high skill for being able to, you know, understand needs so that we can service them, you know. And so I think that is one of my favorite parts of this industry as well. It's almost like a magic. I don't know that there's a word for that, but I can really, really quickly figure out the needs, you know, that are required for a situation or for a person. And that again came from the hospitality industry. And then my other favorite part of our industry is obviously actual hospitality, like enlightened hospitality, not just, you know, I'm serving you, I'm giving you a, you know, a dish or something, but there's a feeling, right, that you can give, that you can create with people. It's that's what they don't forget. They may be like, what's that dish we ate, or what's that name of the dish that you, but they never forget the feeling. The way you make someone feel is something that stays with them forever. And I think our industry is incredibly inspiring in how we're able to make people feel.
Well, that's amazing. But the other question I have for you is, I know that we're getting low on time here, and really quick, I know you talked about psychological safety and the resources Not9to5 has, and I know you have new resources that have just come up, but for the people in this room that are looking to implement some change within their respective spaces, like what other things can they gain from some of what you have available?
Great question. So the first thing I would say is, you know, every kitchen has a first aid kit, and you always have that on the wall in case someone cuts themselves, you know, or burns themselves. And so I think it's so important. Someone coined this term the other day. I didn't make it up, but I'm adopting it. I told him I was adopting it and using it. And it's to build a mental health mise en place. So in the same way that cooks and chefs, we all know how to make a mise en place, and you need to do these things. So we can't create a first aid kit necessarily for mental health challenges, substance use challenges, but we can start to build our mise en place of different tools and different resources. And so, yes, not9to5.org/resources has a laundry list of resources that you can either download or access. There's so many online options there. The government of Canada, you know, has offered Wellness Together Canada, which is a free resource right now for therapy. If you're Canadian, you can have access to it. Outside of that, there's also an abundance of online meetings available for anyone that's looking for, you know, that kind of resource. But in terms of ones that Not9to5 has created, so last year we created a course called Connecting Primary Concerns, and it was built all on the research of what the primary concerns of the industry are. The idea is that you can, that's the book. So we created an online version, and then we also printed a guidebook. There's Suzanne's copy. And this book is, you know, some people don't like to read online, so we created an offline version. What you're seeing there is kind of like our beta. It's like we're beta testing things. We're putting things out into the industry, and then we're getting feedback. Did you like it? Did you hate it? you don't like that design. Okay, this tool is really helpful. This tool you didn't like so much. Like, we're taking all this feedback in. It's so important to me that everything that Not9to5 does is for us, by us. And what that means is that everyone on our volunteer committee, everyone on our board is from the industry. So everyone that's contributing to these resources and these tools has practical lived experience in this industry and understands, what is required and what is needed. And I think that if you go to our resources page, I know it's a long list, and you'll be very excited to hear that we have a new website coming later this year, where we're going to be able to actually help you find tools faster. One of the things that's the biggest feedback I've gotten so far for the resources page is that there's so much there and I don't know how to look through it all. So we're working towards like a search tool and, functions so that it's really easy to find things. But I would say that, in addition to all of that I just shared, definitely check also our Instagram account, because we're constantly sharing resources on there as well that don't always go to our website. So definitely check our Instagram account, and it feeds into our Facebook as well. But yeah, social media is definitely going to start becoming a larger place for community building as well this year, because we're still, a lot of, us are still in lockdown. So yeah, thanks for letting me do a shout out.
Taylor, you're on my.
Oh, I'm on mute. Is that? Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I thank you for sending that to me, and yeah, I can't recommend it enough. We said 75 minutes, I believe, right? Is that where we're at? Or
We said 75. It feels like we could just keep going here.
I think so too. And if everyone's okay with that.
Well, we have one more question, I think. Can we answer one more? Because I think it's a really interesting perspective here. It is from the supplier's perspective. So wondering how other pieces of the industry can contribute to the movement and make some, real and impactful change. I don't know who wants to take that.
Sure.
I'll start.
Go ahead.
I'll start, and then Suzanne, I would love to hear from you. The one thing I didn't mention last year, the other thing we did during the pandemic, because we weren't busy enough creating a course, I also produced a cookbook. And it has dozens of recipes in it. So currently, to donate to Not9to5 right now, you can donate to us. 100% of the proceeds come to us, but you can also get a cookbook as a thank you for your donation. So if you did want to support Not9to5 as an organization, you also will get a cookbook. And it's an ebook you can download as a PDF. And we've raised over $16,000 with this cookbook. So really excited about that. People have loved it. There's so much Canadian culinary talent in the cookbook. Obviously, Suzanne's in it. But yeah, Suzanne, I'll let you answer now from the supplier's chain of support as well.
This is a great question, and the cookbook is fantastic. For those that are interested, please continue to, pick up a book. I know it's so easy to just be on our computers and be on our tablets and our cell phones, but there's something really great about the tangible feeling of pages between your fingertips. This is a great question, and I don't know if I have 100% of the answer, to be honest with you, and not because I'm not working with suppliers right now, just because of my current state. But I do think that, we talk a lot about the restaurants, and I think that the first to really feel that hit was, yes, the restaurants, but more than anything else, it was the suppliers, because they were left with unpaid invoices. They were left with, the uncertainty of like, when will this bill get paid, and are you going to order again? And I think the scary reality of that is that the bailouts that were given out by the government were not necessarily also inclusive to the suppliers and their companies and their businesses, because they don't necessarily fall into the same credentials as far as like a business that is food establishment, because they're not, they're not necessarily food establishments, but they supply food establishments. And I think that that's something that was really missed. And I think if I'm wrong, please someone just add if there was a grant or a loan that was offered for suppliers, but not that I know of, because I know, and we've seen here a lot of businesses that are having to close their doors because of, it wasn't just because no one was ordered, it's because they were sitting on a lot of unpaid invoices. And it's scary to think that the vulnerability goes so deep. And I think it goes back to the point of that it's not just about this one thing. It's about the trickle down effect, the big effect. It's flowing back upstream, all of the effects of this pandemic. And the only thing that comes to my mind as far as an offering for these suppliers and these businesses is that if you have adopted a model within your establishment where you are opening as a general store, or if you are working offering takeout goods and snacks, and to continue to do that, continue to pay cash. Don't ask for 30 days anymore. Eliminate that, because I think that that's where a lot of these businesses are suffering so hard, because they did extend that. And I know it's hard right now as business owners to say, well, I don't have cash, like I don't have the money, I need the extension, I need that support. But so do those businesses. And I think we need to find that fine line between, well, how can we meet in the middle, and how can we make sure that you get paid so that I can get paid, that you get paid. And that is honoring your 7 days, that's honoring your 15 days, but trying to really effort to those, because that's realistic for any business, because you don't know if you're going to be open, but you also don't know if your supplier is going to be able to continue to supply you if you can't continue to actually pay them. And just knowing that it's like a volley. It's like that exchange, that ball is bouncing, and in order for it to continue to bounce and flow, we've got to be able to catch it and pass it and toss it, and understand that we are so dependent on each other. And by any means that that we can find new and realistic solutions to being able to support that. Launch an e-commerce if you have an opportunity within your establishment where you can outsource your supplies. We see these larger companies, the Costco's, the Loblaws, these larger corporations, that the Walmarts, that are making lots and lots and lots of money. And we see a lot of these smaller businesses, the suppliers, that are suffering so greatly. And so we have to do our as much as we can, and know that it's not going to be easy, this up road battle, this hill that we're trying to get over. But I do think that we have an opportunity to support wherever we can, when you can, and to do the right thing as much as possible, man. Just be a fucking human and do the right thing, and really kind of adopt that as much as possible. I hope that, somewhat answered and supported the question. Because
Suzanne,
I'm like, I wish
think
I was in a rest. I wish I had my restaurant right now. I do.
I do think that is a solution, though, for all problems.
Just be a fucking human.
Just be a human. Just be a fucking human and do the right thing is basically life's motto. That's so great, Suzanne.
Get a t-shirt. I'm gonna get a t-shirt. Thank you so much. We've gone over time, and we know everyone's time is precious. This means the world to us here at Shift Change, and I'm sure everybody who has joined us. It's so nice to see everybody stayed the length of the time. We're getting lots of thank yous. It has been wonderful. Anything to add really quick with regards to resources, where we can find them, anything else that you'd like to add? I know not9to5.org is the webpage, not9to5 on Instagram. Have I captured it all?
It's actually not9to5_ on Instagram, but you'd find it if you punched it, if you got that far. The only thing I would ever want to add for anyone that's listening is just to remember that no matter what you're feeling and experiencing, that it is valid and that anything you feel is a natural reaction to life's events. So there's nothing wrong with you if you feel unstable, if you're having a hard time, especially during a pandemic. You know, everything is valid, and you are not alone. You are never as alone as you feel. You know, our feelings are not always facts, and our thoughts are not always accurate, and often can be dangerous. So, you know, to just remember, you know, we have so many text lines, there are in our resources list, but a lot of times people feel like they don't feel like they can talk to anyone. I would highly encourage you to use those text crisis lines. I've used them. They've been very helpful when I'm not ready to actually speak to anyone. In Canada, it's 686868. You can text the word home, or you can really just text anything. I've not texted home. I've actually just said hello and they wrote back. So you can text anything to that number and someone will respond. If anyone is from the US, it's 741-741. And so that would just be my last thing, is just please remember that you are never alone as you feel, and that anything you feel is valid.
Suzanne, any last thoughts?
Mute. I was on mute. Storytelling is everything for me. And I dream a lot about food. I dream about why I love what I do. And I share that with you guys all today. And it's with, you know, this dignity, this work that we do, when you can find something that you believe in so much, and it's not always going to give you back what you put out, because that's just unfortunately sometimes the truth and the realities. But know that you don't have to stay in it if it doesn't feel right and it doesn't see you, that you can always find another place, another community, another resource that can help you to get you to whatever it is that you feel that you need. Don't feel like you're ever stuck. Don't ever feel that you don't have access. And if you don't, reach out, call someone, use the numbers, and know that there is always somebody on the other line listening. You're not alone. And that, you know, these are very, very challenging days right now, but very exciting to see what is possible ahead, and reimagining and redefining what hospitality is, because there's so much beauty in what we do in this industry. And I deeply, deeply love it. As much as it has knocked me down, it has lifted me up. And I will continue to work in this. But find my work, redefine my work as much as I can, and support all those that are ready to listen and willing and able. And I'm just so grateful to be here with you all, and thank you.
Mic drop.
Oh, that was incredible. That was a mic drop, and I feel bad because I'm ruining it now. But I want to say how grateful I am, not only for you both being here, but that you both exist, and that you're contributing so much positivity to the industry and creating so much sustainable change. And I just want to thank you for that. I am a huge fan. And I'm sure everyone in this audience, is going to follow everything. Is going to, and I am an individual that watches your social media all the time, and I go to the websites regularly. And me as an individual that I'm working with people, I found immense benefit for me. So that's a shout out to both you, and thank you, and everyone here. Please do keep following, support where you can, and use those resources, create that sustainable change, and help lead an industry that is going to be even better in the future. Thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you. Super
Thank
supportive
you.
words from supportive individuals. Again, it's Not9to5. shiftchangenow.org. We will post this video on shiftchangenow.org on behalf of everyone here and from Tacofino. Thank you for joining us today. And you will always have our support on the West Coast. And you just have to give us a shout. Thanks again for coming, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Thank you. Have a
Bye.
good night.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye.